Hi, today we're going to be doing a line test on a Honda Fit. We're going to be checking the 1-2 clutches on it. We've already, the other day we already went through doing the line pressure test on the main line pressure. Today we're going to be checking the 1-2 clutches. I'm going to show you some of the tools that we need to do for it. One of the reasons that we need to do a line pressure test is to find out if there's actually line pressure in that clutch system. So if I'm missing line pressure for, say, second gear, then obviously the clutches for second gear will not be able to engage. So this is a good test for it. In most cases, on most cars now, you're going to get led there by a service code in the car. So, but in the case of the Honda Fit, there's actually a pressure test. So I'm going to show you how to find the information in either ALLDATA or ProDemand. Well, I'm going to use ALLDATA today, but ProDemand is very, very similar. And even Identifix is very, very similar. So you can use any of the shop manuals, you'll be able to find it. I'm going to show you the tools that we're going to be using, and of course how to do it. So let's go. Some of the common basic tools you're going to need are obviously a set of wrenches for taking the line pressure bolts out. I also have a socket set that will come in handy. When we go through the procedure, they're going to ask us to hook up the scan tool. On the Fit, basically we're checking to see if there's any codes in it, and we put it in the transmission so we can see the speed of the transmission, what gear we're in. And of course, there's the line pressure test kit. Okay, so I'd like to show you a little bit more on this. So come on over here, we'll have a look. So here's an up-close view of our line pressure test, a tester that we'll be using. Right here we have a lot of different fittings for the different test ports that we need to go into the transmission. Depending on which car it is, will give us the test port. So what we have to do is we match up the threads to the test port, and then we attach our quick connector to the test port. There's a hose that goes on, and so what would happen is it would click into our test port here like that. And be very careful, guys. If it's not clicked in properly, I've seen them come out and you have a big mess on your hands. Okay, and we also have two sets of gauges. So this gauge here only goes up to 100 psi or 700 kilopascals, and this gauge here goes from 0 all the way up to 3,500 kilopascals or 500 psi. Now typically the pressures that we're going to be dealing with are probably in the 150 to 250 psi range. So we'll be using this gauge and not this gauge, because this one only goes up to 100, so it's not beneficial for us to use. Okay, really depends on the transmission and what the clutch pressures are, but typically clutch pressures are fairly high, so most of the time you're going to be using this gauge. And again, on this gauge it also clicks in and holds onto the gauge. So it's the nice thing about using this kit is that we can just hook into the transmission, and then afterwards we can put the hose on. All right, so the next step that we're going to be doing is going to the Mitchell or Mitchell ProDemand or ALLDATA or Identifix or even the shop manuals for the car, the originals. But for us, we're going to be using ALLDATA, and so let me show you how that works.
Okay, we're in ALLDATA, and we're going to pick the 2010 Honda Fit, and we're going to go down to transmission and drivetrain, and from there we're going to go and we're going to pick automatic transmissions and transaxles. Over in your automatic transmission information, you're going to go down to component tests and general diagnostics. and we're going to go down to pressure test. And that's how we get to it. Another way of doing it is just to enter pressure test up here. And you can also get to it through the search. Once we're in here, we're going to go and we're going to look at obviously what tools that we need. We've already gone over that. It tells us that we have to top up the transmission fluid. We also have to put the vehicle up on a lift and allow the front wheels to rotate freely, because they'll actually be moving when we do the test. Remove the splash shield to gain access to the service ports. And we're going to be connecting the HDS or the scanner to the DLC port underneath the dash, which I'll show you when we do the demonstration. Here's some of the tools. We are not going to be using this type of gauge. We're going to be using the gauge that I showed you earlier. And these are the ports. So there's different ports. So this port here is the actual the pressure port for full pressure, and it tells us to start the engine and warm it up to normal operating temperature and measure the line pressure at the line pressure inspection port P. So that gives us the line pressure of the transmission. So when we first measure that, if we have no line pressure at all, it's kind of useless to go on, because that means that the transmission itself is not building any pressure. But what we're going to be looking at is the line pressures on the 1 and 2. So if we go down further, we're going to, with the engine off, disconnect the oil pressure gauge from the line pressure inspection port, which we already have it disconnected, and so we're just going to go down to the next step that we need to do, which is remove the coolant hose bracket, remove the air cleaner assembly, and then remove the coolant hose bracket, connect the oil pressure gauge to the first clutch. So we can see that the first clutch is this B here, and so that's where we're going to hook up our first gauge to, and we can see that the second gear is here on the side of the transmission. So there's one on the very top up here in this section, and then there's number 2 that's down here. So those are the 2 ports that we're going to be looking at. If we go further down, it's going to tell us to start the engine and shift into the first gear and measure the first clutch pressure at the first clutch pressure inspection port while holding the engine speed at 2000 RPM. This is important. Then we're going to shift into second gear and measure the second clutch pressure at the second pressure port while holding the engine speed at 2000 RPM. So that way we're going to see what pressures we have in the 1 and 2 clutches. So we have our service limits here, and so what we're looking at, our gauges happen to be in PSI, so we'll be looking at between 130 and 140 PSI in either clutch 1 or either clutch 2. And so long as we hit those limits, then we know that we're right on the money.
So just going to hook the Snap-on scanner up to the DLC port. So this is the same port for checking engine and checking everything. As a matter of fact, it's kind of the gateway into the computer systems that are on the car and the multiple computers. So we just hooked that up, and then we're going to use our scanner. So now that we've checked our codes, we go back into the main menu of the scanner, and we're going to pick data. And what we're mainly interested in is the transmission data and the RPM, and there's all kinds of indicators here of what gear it might be in, and stuff like that, depending on. So we're ready to go. We're gonna go hook up the gauges to the car, and we're gonna be checking the first and the second clutches.
So we've already removed the bracket and the air filter to gain access to port B. After loosening port B with a wrench, I'm just going to remove it.
So you don't want to drop the washer or lose the washer, otherwise you're going to have a leak when you put it back together. Okay, so we take that bracket out, and then you can see that there's a line pressure hole there. Okay, so make sure you do this with the engine off, because that's going to have a lot of pressure in it.
So we're matching the threads up on the bolt that came out of the port B and with our adapter. It's really important that the threads match.
Be really careful, guys, when you're installing these things, because if you cross thread it, you can scrap the transmission, because it's not going to be like, even if you want to put threads on it, you got to take the transmission out, so it's going to turn into a big job. So right now I'm just putting it in hand tight. I don't know if you can see that I'm just turning it with one finger.
Yeah, I got it.
I'm getting it in.
Into the with that.
There we go. I got my hose on. Hook up our gauge. Okay. So, in order for the car to run, because the MAF sensor is on the air cleaner, we have to put the air cleaner back into the car.
We're now going to be installing the clutch for adapter 2. Of course, with we're also going to double check that the threads are correct for the second adapter. It's just so super important that the threads match up. So we're checking the thread pitch and the thread itself to make sure it lines up. And we're going to bring it over and install it into the car. Of course, we have all the plastic shields underneath the car taken off, so this makes it a lot easier. And I'm installing it hand tight. By installing it with my fingers, I can be ensured that I'm not cross-threading as I'm going into the transmission. Now that we have the adapter installed, we're ready to install the hoses. I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that your quick connectors are run securely. If they're not, you're going to have a big mess. So we're just hooking it up to we've already hooked it up to the gauge, but we're just hooking it up to the car, and now we'll be able to put the car down and do our tests.
And this is going to be our second gear. On a Honda, it's the second clutch and the first clutch and the second
put the
clutch.
gauges.
Okay.
The gauge on the left.
So we'll start it up.
The first gear clutch, and the gauge on the right is the second gear clutch. We're going to start it up.
Sure that we don't have any.
Just make sure that we don't have any leaks.
We don't have any drips there, and we don't have any.
Ensure that we don't have any leaks.
Any leak down there, so
We're
we're
going
good.
to put the car into drive and rev it up to 2,000 RPM.
115, a little bit low.
115 psi.
Okay.
This could be because we didn't let the car
Maybe
warm up enough.
maybe the engine's
the second
cooled a
time
bit,
around.
so
we'll just wait
when
and
it
see
warms
if
up,
we
we'll
get a
see.
higher read.
So we'll run it for a little bit longer. Okay, and we'll check the next gear.
I'm just going to allow my system
A little tiny
so
drip.
that
I'm
we
gonna
can
look
get the
at
second gear.
So
As
now
you
we
can
put
see
it
by
in
the
second
gauge on the
gear
right,
at 2,000 RPM.
achieved,
And what do we have is a line
PSI
load of
so this is
110,
what the
120, 130.
specifications are working.
Exactly 130.
So
Okay.
now pass the two tests.
So now, let's just go back to first gear again. Just go back to first gear. Give it some gas to bring it up to 2,000.
So after running the test, we concluded that the first clutch was a
anyone
little
see a
bit on
problem?
the low side, but the second gear clutch was good.
It's a bit low.
We can continue to go on to
First gear
the
clutch is a
second,
little bit low.
I mean the third,
We
and
have
fourth, and
some
fifth
kind of
clutches, which is probably what our students will do
No, because
in order to
the line
practice.
pressure,
We try to avoid the first clutch since it's
pressure P,
quite difficult to take apart.
is correct.
And
So that means that there's some kind of problem maybe
that would
with
be
the clutches.
it for the line pressure test. I hope this was informative as it was fun.
A little bit on the low side. Okay? Alright guys, so that's the end of the demonstration. It's very easy to just reverse what we just did, to take everything apart. And now it's time for you guys to try it.